Hey everyone, Tara Malarkey. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a specific area of money mindset that I think is really important. We just talked about this on my mastermind call the other day. And so I know that it's really alive. Like everyone on the call was super captivated by this topic. And I know that it affects everyone. So I wanted to do a short podcast episode talking to you about when you keep teetering at feast or famine. You know, the feeling like you make some and then somehow you find yourself struggling again, and then you make some money and then you find yourself struggling again. I did this for a bit in my business. And so I know the feeling really intimately. And I want to talk to you about like, what is that? Why does that happen if that's your experience and what to do about it? So the thing is, like, we can't change something if it's living unconsciously. So that's why I do this, right? Because to the extent that, this is operating and happening in your life, but you don't realize that it's happening, right? Like it's a pattern that's going unnoticed. You can't do anything about it because you're not even aware that it's happening. Once you bring awareness to it and you're like, oh my gosh, that does happen to me, you know? That does happen to me all the time. In fact, it's probably been happening for years, this pattern that I'm living in, where it's like, why can't I progress truly? Like, why can't I hit a new level and stay there? And so that's why I want to talk about it today. All right. So, pretty much, this is what's called a threshold. And this comes from your comfort zone. And your comfort zone is actually established by your nervous system. And your nervous system is actually wired for certain experiences only based on familiarity, not based on like essentially what you want to have happen. So I've talked about this before on the podcast. And if you've read my book, you've heard me talk about this because I love this topic, which is that, you can want to be wealthy and want to get out of that panic mode of money in your life, but you can't ever seem to have the experience of it. It seems elusive to you, right? You might have had glimpses of it, but then you just go right back to where you normally are. And this is because your nervous system is actually wired for this feast or famine, or for like panic and then ease, and then panic and then ease, and then panic and then ease. It's kind of chaotic. And a lot of us who have had this experience or are working on getting out of this experience, you've had some level maybe of chaos in your early life, in your early childhood, perhaps with your family and the relationships in your family, but it could also have been the money experience in your family. So I know for me, this really rings true because, there were just moments where there was panic about money, and then there was moments where we were okay. And it seemed my mom, she was mostly a single mom most of my life. And, she really like kind of went on that up and down cycle. And in my early adult years, I also did as well. It was like, if I made some, I spent some. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, panic. And I had a corporate career early. So, what I made was stable, but especially coming into entrepreneurship, when what you make, especially in the beginning, it really depends on like what you're doing, like how much action you're taking, and how much you're selling. I definitely went on feast and famine cycles. So my client the other day, she mentioned that she was having this experience, and I'll just share a little bit of what she shared because I think that you may relate to it. So she has had some very successful months, and then, personal things came in, and she kind of pulled back and retracted on her business a bit. And then, about a month ago, she decided, okay, I'm going back, I'm going all in, I'm going to, do this and that and this and that. And in the past, few weeks, she's had a lot of success because she's put a lot of more attention and energy and focus. And that really came from the fact that she needed to, right? Things started financially getting to be a panic mode in her life and her family. She didn't want to tap into like family accounts with her husband and stuff. And she wanted her business to be self-sustaining, but it got to a point where, you know, she started panicking about it. So then she came back strong. She's made a bunch of money in the past few weeks. So, because she knows what to do when she has to do it. But interestingly enough, the other day on the call, she said to me, yeah, so, I made some great, sales this past few weeks, and now I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. And, how do you manage your overwhelm, Tara, in running like a multi-million dollar business? And so, at first we started talking about overwhelm and, how to manage your time and discipline and things like that. But this is always what happens to me and my clients. And, if you've mentored with me at all, you know that I always go to the deeper level, like what's going on underneath the surface of that. And what we came to was that, she started feeling overwhelmed. And what she was about to do right before we talked about it was start to just pull back, right, on the actions that she was taking, because she started to feel overwhelmed. Like she's on social media all the time, and she's needing to do reels, and she's needing to do this and that and this and that. And all those things are working, right? And she's making money now. So what she has done is she's eased her panic, right? She's gone past the threshold that panic kicks in. And all of a sudden, unbeknownst to her, she doesn't even realize that it's happening. It shows up as overwhelm to have her pull back and say, you know what? I just need to ease back. It's just too much. Now, all of that might be true. Like it might be too much. And I am not interested in telling women to hustle past places where, they're not healthy. Like, let's not do that. But this is really key to look at. Like, it's really important to look at how we might continuously do that. That might be a pattern. Now, I've been working with this client for a couple of years, so I knew underneath that this was a pattern of something. And I said, interesting how, you've done well the past few weeks, and now you want to pull it back because you're overwhelmed. So I want to ask you, if this is happening to you, like, you got to know what your threshold is. Like, when does panic fire for you? When does it fire? Like, at what point do you see your bank account balance get to a certain level and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, that's not good. But if it's above that level, you're like, we're good. Millionaires, multimillionaires have a much higher threshold, right? It's like they're not going to panic until, bank accounts start to get into maybe like 6-figure levels, because they're used to 7-figure levels. And people who have, smaller money experience, it might be in the hundreds, right? Or the thousands. So it doesn't really matter. It just matters what it is for you, to start to understand what your panic is. Because when you panic, then you start taking action, then you alleviate the panic, and then you go back to relaxing a little bit. And then it's just this constant cycle. And you never get out of this panic, feast, or famine cycle if you keep operating there. So what you want to do is you want to commit to a new threshold. Okay. If your threshold right now is like $5,000, and then $5,000 comes in from a client and you're like, you know what, we're good for a while. You want to be like, no. My business cannot operate. And I am one client away from something bad happening, right? $5,000 is not enough of a cushion. I am deciding that our new cushion is $20,000. Okay. I'm just making up the numbers for you. You plug in your own numbers, but that's essentially what you want to do. And you commit to that. So now it's no longer 5,000, it's 20,000. And even though right now you feel like I'm good if it's at 15, you have to commit to this new threshold that the panic starts, if it's below 20,000. So now that you've made your 5 or 6 or 7, you're still under the 20. So you got to keep going. You got to keep working. And it will be a moment where there might be a little overwhelmed, because what you're doing is expanding your capacity, literally in your nervous system, to hold more. And they might be moments where you need to push past where you would normally stop. It's like working out, right? It's like if you want to lift more weight or you want to run further, guess what? You can't run the same amount or lift the same amount every single day and progress. you're going to have to push past the moment where you want to stop, right? You want to push past that moment where you're like, yeah, okay, I think I'm going to stop. Like if I talk to you really when I like to go to classes where there's like running and stuff, because I push myself so much faster, or I mean, so much more than if I'm on my own. If I'm on my own, as soon as I start to feel some discomfort, I'm like, oh boy, that was good. I ran 2 miles. I'm good. Right? So it's the same for you. And a lot of this might be really unconscious, subconscious, happening underneath the surface. So when you commit to a new threshold, you do not like allow yourself to say, oh, we're good now. Okay. Unless you're at that level. When you get to that, say, $20,000 new threshold level, so one is commit to a new threshold. Two is when panic eases, because you made a little bit of money, but not your new threshold, you got to keep working. You want to do it sustainably, but you got to keep the pressure on. Okay. Number three is you want to notice your self-talk. So if you're starting to tell yourself, oh, I'm so tired, or, oh, I can't do it, or, oh, it's too much. And imagine your mind will come up with a lot of different excuses. You might even create sickness. You might create accidents. You might create different things because your mind is so powerful and smart. So just beware, watch it. And if you can, bring it to a mentor, which is exactly what my client did the other day. She wasn't even aware this was really happening until we went underneath the surface. Then we got to bring it up. Now she's not going to stop. We created a new threshold and she's like, okay, pressure's still on. I have not alleviated the panic, right? We still need to be much higher than this for this business to go where I want it to go. Okay. And then number four is you want to create a new norm, a new comfort zone. So the cool thing is, say you get to that $20,000 level and you don't let it go below that $20,000 level. That's when you're going to be able to create more sustainability in your workload and your workflow, right? It's going to be a lot easier for you to sustain the work that needs to happen on a daily basis for your client or for your business to sustain at that level than it is if you keep going from 0 and trying to get to 20 and 0 to try to get to 20, right? It's the same thing as working out again, right? If you stop working out for a while and then you try to come back, you're not going to be able to hit that, say, 5 miles, that you ran before, because your endurance has decreased, and it's going to take longer and a lot more energy. But if you keep running 5 miles, 3 times a week, it's a lot easier to sustain. And maybe you even only need to run a little bit and you keep sustaining it, if that makes sense, right? So you don't want to get to the point where you have to like build up so much energy. This is where the exhaustion comes in. This is why you want to quit sometimes, right? Because you get so exhausted because you have to go from 0 to 20,000 a month versus, continuing to keep it going. Sustaining something is a lot easier than having to build it all over again. And so if you're at the place where you've been running your business for a while, you want to be at a place where you can sustain it. Say $20,000 is your new threshold. Well, then you can start to take it higher and higher and higher. And we have clients doing 80, 90, 100,000 a month or more, right? And that's because we have to set a new normal, a new threshold. And you can't let yourself keep talking yourself into relaxing when you feel a little overwhelmed. That's going to happen every single time until you take yourself out of that nervous system threshold comfort zone. That is not even what you want it to be. You want it to be much higher, but your body and your mind is so kind of smart that it takes you to those places that you don't even want to be. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. A great book to read if you haven't read it already. I always recommend it to my students. It's called The Big Leap, I think it is, by Gay Hendricks. It talks about these thresholds and self-sabotage and, just how we can create a new life for ourselves. A lot of it, or everything, is really happening in our mind, and then the actions we take from the thoughts we're telling ourselves. So go read that book. And if this served you, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram at 7figurefemme, or leave a comment below if you're listening to YouTube. Share this podcast with a friend. I love you, and I'll see you next time.